Hat, sunglasses, Pepsi, notes, sources, thick skin. Check. You already know. Let's go. Welcome to Golden Blue today, everybody. This is a college football channel. So if you like college football, hit the like and subscribe button. It's that simple. Also, send gear to represent your team and be a part of my background forever. All you have to do is send it to P.O. Box 360, Liberty, South Carolina 29657. It's very, very strange. The SEC doesn't look as good as they usually do, and yet they still have four teams ranked in the top 10. First, let's look at the standings. In the SEC East, of course, in first place, number 1, Georgia. They're 11-0, 8-0 in the SEC. Second place, number 10, Tennessee, 9-2, 5-2 in the SEC. Third place, South Carolina, 7-4, 4-4 in the SEC. Fourth place, Kentucky, 6-5, 3-5 in the SEC. Fifth place, Sun Belt Billy in Florida, 6-5, 3-5 in the SEC. Sixth place, Missouri, 5-6, 2-5 in the SEC. And of course, in last place, Vanderbilt, but 5-6. They could get bowl eligible if they can somehow beat Tennessee. 5-6, 2-5 in the SEC. In the SEC West, first place, number 5, LSU, 9-2, 6-1 in the SEC. Second place, number 7, Alabama, 9-2, 5-2 in the SEC. Third place, number 20, Ole Miss, 8-3, 4-3 in the SEC. Fourth place, Mississippi State, 7-4, 3-4 in the SEC. Fifth place, Arkansas, 6-5, 3-4 in the SEC. Sixth place, Auburn, 5-6, 2-5 in the SEC. What a train wreck Auburn is. And finally, last place, the train wreck of all train wrecks, Texas A&M, 4-7, 1-6 in the SEC. How did Texas A&M get so bad? I mean, they recruit at an excellent level, and yet they're 4-7, 1-6 in the SEC. I think it's time for Jimbo to go and for Texas A&M to move on from him. He is driving y'all into a ditch just like he did to Florida State. And I tried to warn you. Now you're sitting there having to eat a lot of money if you do have to fire him. So a lot of games in the regular season in the SEC have not made much sense. Not at all. And it did start in week 1. In week 1, Florida beat number 7 Utah 29-26. Although I thought that upset could happen because it was on the road for Utah. First game of the year. Florida doesn't realize how bad they are. And that's exactly what happened. But still, it didn't make sense. The crazy thing is, after Florida did upset Utah, they got bumped from non-ranked to number 12. How silly does that look now? Number 19, Arkansas beats a good number 23, Cincinnati, 31-24. Knowing what we know now, that game doesn't make sense. Cincinnati should have won that game, but since it was a road game in the SEC, that makes it tough and basically unwinnable. I'll get back to that and Arkansas here in just a minute. And of course, number 1, Georgia beating number 11, Oregon, 49-3. We thought Georgia was going to run through their entire schedule, nobody even be close. And yes, they're undefeated, but man, they have been scared multiple times. So hindsight being 2020, that game doesn't make much sense either, especially Oregon being a good team now. And oh yeah, the week 1 loss that everybody has seemed to forget about. LSU losing to Florida State, basically a home game, technically a neutral game, 24-23 because of a block point after. The loss still happened. It still counts. That's just why LSU has 2 losses. Week 2, Appalachian State goes on the road and upsets number 6 Texas A&M 17-14. Yeah, now saying number 6 beside Texas A&M sounds a little bit silly, doesn't it? Number 20, Kentucky goes on the road and beats number 12 Florida. Just because they beat Utah, they bumped them up all the way to number 12. And Kentucky made that ranking look silly. Beat them 26-16. Number 16, Arkansas hammers South Carolina 44-30. That doesn't make sense knowing what we know now. We all remember number 1, Alabama going on the road and surviving mighty Texas 20-19. This was one of the reasons why the SEC tries to stay away from true road games out of conference. They try to eliminate any possible pitfalls for the teams in the SEC, which is really smart. I'm not trash talking the SEC. It's actually really smart scheduling. Week 3, nothing really interesting happened. So we jump to week 4. Number 23, Texas A&M beats number 10, Arkansas 23-21. Looking back, that's a terrible loss for Arkansas because that's only 1 of 4 wins for Texas A&M in the entire season. And of course, number 11, Tennessee finally gets the monkey off their back. They barely beat number 20, Florida at home 38-33. I thought Tennessee was supposed to be really good and Florida was having a down year. Week 5, number 1, Georgia goes on the road and they get scared by a bad Missouri 26-22. They did have to come from behind, but hey, a win's a win, right? You're still undefeated. Same thing for LSU in week 5. They go on the road and survive a scare from a terrible bad Auburn 21-17. They were down 17-0 at one point in that game. That week made absolutely no sense for the two best teams in the SEC. We jump on to week 6. Number 1 Alabama has to hang on against a terrible, bad Texas A&M 24-20. Then of course number 8 Tennessee goes on the road and absolutely blasts number 25 LSU 40-13. But apparently that doesn't matter according to the new playoff rankings. Week 7, number 3 Alabama goes on the road and gets beat by number 6 Tennessee 52-49. Alabama's not as good as what we thought they were, and yet Tennessee had to hold on at home and barely beat them. Week number 8, South Carolina gets the monkey off their back and they beat Texas A&M 30-24. That was really the only game worth mentioning in week 8. Week 9, Missouri comes back and beats number 25 South Carolina 23-10. So the week after South Carolina gets the monkey off their back, albeit a bad Texas A&M team at home, they stay at home and they get beat by a bad Missouri. That game made absolutely no sense. Only 10 points against Missouri, especially knowing what we know now. Week 10, number 1 Tennessee goes on the road to Georgia and they get beat 27-13. Pretty much what everybody expected, proving that Tennessee did not deserve that number 1 ranking. Number 6 Alabama goes on the road and loses to number 10 LSU 31-32 in overtime. LSU had already been put on a pedestal by then. This just made them go up even higher, even though they have 2 losses. And apparently people forgot that they lost to Florida State and got blown out by Tennessee. And all of a sudden that makes LSU a national championship contender. Give me a freaking break. Getting back to Arkansas and beating Arkansas on the road and how difficult it is. Well, Liberty did it in week 10, 21-19, and yet Liberty still didn't get ranked. I thought winning on the road in the SEC is something spectacular, and Liberty was not rewarded. And Liberty does have a really good record. They should have got ranked. Moving on to week 11. Number 7, LSU has to hold on the road to Arkansas. Again, Arkansas. Liberty went on the road and beat Arkansas, but LSU had to hold on the road to Arkansas 13-10. Vanderbilt goes on the road and beats number 24 Kentucky 24-21. That made no sense to me, but it happened. South Carolina gets absolutely blasted on the road by a bad Florida 38-6. 6 points is all they could manage against Florida? What? Yeah, this is the nonsense that I'm talking about. And then Auburn barely beats Texas A&M 13-10. You can tell just how bad these two teams have fallen. And then finally, week 12, the madness continues. Number 1, Georgia goes on the road and beats Kentucky 16-6. 16-6. Wow. But they do stay undefeated. Number 5, Tennessee. Speaking of South Carolina, they go on the road and get absolutely hammered by South Carolina 63-38. This is the same South Carolina that the week before went on the road and got absolutely hammered by Florida. Go figure. Somebody make that make sense, because I can't do it. Number 14, Ole Miss gets exposed just like I thought they would on the road to Arkansas. We're talking about Arkansas again. 42-27. Texas A&M beats UMass 20-3. Listen, UMass is one of the worst teams in the nation, and the fact that Texas A&M could only muster 20 points on them, that's poverty. That is straight poverty. That should be the nail in the coffin. Jimbo Fisher needs to be fired at Texas A&M. That is ridiculous. And finally, Florida goes on the road and loses to Vanderbilt. Wow. 31-24. And Vanderbilt is 1 game away from getting bowl eligible, and they're hosting Tennessee. And the way this SEC has gone this year, Vanderbilt could beat Tennessee to get bowl eligible. That's how crazy this year has been. So no, this year the SEC has not separated themselves from the rest of the conferences like everybody claims. Why there's 4 teams ranked in the top 10 is beyond me. Everybody has beaten up on everybody. Bad teams have beaten good teams. Good teams have survived bad teams, and everything in between. This makes absolutely no sense, and I love it. This is college football. Finally, college football is happening. Chaos is happening. This has been one of my favorite years since 2007. And I realize West Virginia was a victim of the number 2 curse. But overall, that season was great. As bad as that last loss was for West Virginia, it was still a really good year, capped off by a Fiesta Bowl win over Oklahoma. So yes, I still consider it one of my favorite seasons. This is a close second. This season is a close second. And the SEC, in part, has made it possible to make it a memorable 2022. And all this leading up to the Week 13 matchups. It starts on Thursday, the Egg Bowl. Mississippi State, who's 7-4, at number 25, Ole Miss, who's 8-3. Ole Miss favored by 2. And this probably will be the last game for Lane Kiffin, because from what I'm hearing, Lane Kiffin will be announcing he'll be the new head coach at Auburn following the Egg Bowl. Can Ole Miss finish the regular season on a winning note and send Lane Kiffin off to the sunset with the parade? I don't know. Ole Miss has been overrated all year, and Mississippi State is a pretty good team. Then we move on to the Friday games. Arkansas at Missouri. Missouri's trying to get to a bowl game. That's right. They can still get to a bowl. Arkansas is already bowl eligible. They are favored by 3 points. But I think Missouri will pull off this victory and get bowl eligible. The rivalry between Florida at number 16, Florida State. Florida's 6-5. Florida State's 8-3. And Florida State's favored by 9.5. You know, as you look at these rivalry matchups between the ACC and the SEC teams, isn't it funny that the SEC teams have a worse record than the ACC teams? And yet they use the excuse of the SEC to keep Alabama and LSU ranked above Clemson. I just find that a little strange, don't you? Then we move on to Saturday games. First, the Georgia Tech versus number 1 Georgia matchup. And this is literally the only matchup where the SEC team has a better record than the ACC team. Georgia Tech's 5-6, trying to get to a bowl, and Georgia's 11-0, trying to get to playoffs. Georgia's a 35.5 point favorite. I am not watching that game. It's probably going to be a blowout. Then the Palmetto Bowl. South Carolina, who's 7-4, at number 8 Clemson, who's 10-1. Clemson is a 14.5 point favorite. Don't show up lazy, Clemson, because South Carolina is a good team. If this was on the road, I would most definitely have Clemson on an upset alert. But since it's at home, I do think Clemson takes care of business. Another ACC-SEC matchup, number 25 Louisville at Kentucky. Louisville 7-4, Kentucky's 6-5. Kentucky is a slight 3-point favorite because it is at home, but Kentucky also lost at home to Vanderbilt. So I think Louisville can go on the road and take care of business. Auburn at number 7, Alabama, the Iron Bowl. Auburn trying to get bowl eligible, so they are playing for something. Can they pull the unthinkable as 22-point underdogs and go on the road and beat Alabama? I don't know, but that would be certainly crazy. And you know I'd be making a video just about that. Number 5, LSU goes on the road to play Texas A&M, trying to stay playoff eligible. LSU is 9-2, Texas A&M 4-7. LSU just a 10-point favorite. That's a little small for me. Texas A&M is a terrible team. And the impression that the playoff committee is giving me that if LSU wins out and wins the SEC, they're in the playoffs. Because the new playoff rankings, they're number 5. I disagree with that strongly, but that looks like what the playoff committee is trying to tell us. The possibility of Texas A&M actually upsetting LSU is real. It's not that big of a long shot. So that begs the question, if LSU loses to Texas A&M and then goes on to beat Georgia in the SEC championship, does the playoff committee put LSU in the playoffs as a 3-loss SEC champion? Because the signals that they've given us so far would indicate that the answer would be yes. And finally, number 10, Tennessee at Vanderbilt. Tennessee's 9-2, Vanderbilt's 5-6. We didn't think Tennessee could go on the road and lose to South Carolina. Could Vanderbilt get bowl eligible by beating Tennessee at home? What a story that would be. Tennessee is a 14-point favorite. Listen, because of the craziness that's already happened in the regular season, it wouldn't surprise me if Vanderbilt beat Tennessee or if Texas A&M beat LSU. Auburn went on the road and beat Alabama. Georgia Tech going on the road and beating Georgia. Yeah, that one's a little bit of a stretch. But the rest of those that I mentioned would not surprise me. This could be a crazy ending to a crazy season for the SEC. Stay tuned. So y'all let me know in the comments section. Is this basically what you expected from the SEC this year? Or did you expect some teams to be better and some teams to be worse? Because I'm going to tell you, it surprised me. That's all I got for you for this show. Like and subscribe if you haven't already. And I'll see you on my next show.